Hey guys, our guest tonight is the front man of the underground hip hop group Foreign Policy. The band consists of himself from the US and his DJ and producer, Master Shake, who is from St. Petersburg, Russia.
Yep.
He's also a researcher, an herbalist, a graphic designer, and a visual artist. He became ill about a year and a half ago with an unknown illness after being bitten by a tick walking in the woods with his dog. After doing extensive research into biowarfare history and covert operations, he is here tonight to present chilling evidence of what appears to be an ongoing covert biological warfare program involving Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses conducted at various biodefense labs, such as Plum Island, the NIH Rocky Mountains Lab, and several others. Welcome to our show, Adam.
Hey, Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Thank you for having me on. It's great to be here with you guys. I know I've been kind of in the shadows working with you guys somewhat.
You really have, yeah. You're the one who introduced us to Stephen Shellen.
Yeah, Steven's a great guy. She's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yes.
Yeah, we love Shellen.
It's just awesome.
Great sense of
And
humor.
Shellen's a good guy.
so yeah, like I've been awake for a while now, for a long time. I've been through a lot of stuff, and I spent a lot of time researching. Kind of funny, like it was probably around 2006. I just happened to come across this book called Lab 257. Right here.
Yeah.
By Michael Christopher Carroll. And in this book, he goes over Plum Island, New York is an animal disease center, but it's run with joint military biowarfare research from the 50s. So they kind of they're kind of just like, they're like the front. The USDA, the Department of Agriculture, runs the Animal Disease Center. They study animal diseases, and then they have like certain labs on the side or whatever. The Army comes in, does their research, so it's like joint military. A lot of times, like, there'll be a military guy who runs the USDA as well. Well, they were doing a lot of research on ticks and diseases and stuff. And in 1975, Lyme disease, it was an outbreak in Old Lyme, Connecticut. It's, I don't know if you could see this, but
Yeah, we see. Okay.
that's how close it is.
Wow.
About 10 miles away.
Yeah.
And I got so much documentation of them working with all sorts of like, malaria-like parasites that are now like in ticks, like 4 or 5 different diseases that they have, like mycoplasma fermentans. I have them working on that in 1964.
Who was working on it, Adam?
Well, it was the military, but it was also the USDA.
Okay.
Wow.
It seems like to me, like the USDA did some, they would research animal diseases,
Right.
and then all of a sudden you would see a human form, like the human disease emerge. Like
Okay.
Oh.
There's one called babesiosis that emerged right in 1967 on Nantucket, just a little bit east to Plum Island.
So the research that you were doing, you're saying that they were working with animals, and then all of a sudden it started cropping up in people?
Not only were they working with animals, they were working with ticks, and they were actually infecting ticks with exotic diseases
They were infecting ticks. Oh my
in
goodness.
their experiments. Yeah.
Wow. So they actually had ticks. They would infect the ticks
Yep.
with and then
Because
and
they're
then the ticks-
blood-borne, so
right.
yeah, so they that
and
makes
then the
sense.
ticks would escape or get out or whatever.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go over the timeline.
Yep.
And
Okay.
we'll start from there. First, I just want to say, all right, so it was about a year and a half ago. I was walking in the woods. Well, actually, it was like, I don't even know where I actually picked it up, but I remember I was in the shower and I took something off my back, and it was a black-legged tick.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ticks that you get Lyme disease from. And I didn't really think of it because, like, I've gotten bit by ticks before, and, like,
Sure.
you just, oh, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
Well, then a couple weeks later, it's just like I'm getting this, like, horrible, like, I don't even know how to explain it to you. It's like, it felt like my head was vibrating. It was like, but it was like crushing my head. The worst headaches. Like, I couldn't think straight. I was at work and I'm like, I busted a hose on, like, I was doing something, and I just, it was like I was in a fog, and I was just like, wow. So I went to the doctors. They didn't know what was wrong with me. My ears are ringing all the time. Headaches, joint pain, chronic fatigue. And they had no idea what was wrong with me. And basically, so they ordered scans, like CAT scans, everything. Everything came back normal. I got blood work. Everything came back normal. They tested me for Borrelia burgdorferi. That's Lyme disease.
Yeah.
It came back negative. So for a little while, I was like, oh, well, then I guess I don't have Lyme disease, because at first I thought I did. But then afterwards, doing a lot more research, I realized that only about 15 to 22% of people will test positive. And the more sick you are, the more chance you'll test negative. So the people that test negative are the sickest, because they're not making antibodies to fight it. They're not making antibodies to fight the infection. So, and the tests are just, like, wildly inaccurate. They're incompetent.
Huh.
So the tests are the antibodies. That's how they do it.
There's two different tests, and they're both, you know, like, it's so ridiculous. It's almost like they were designed to fail.
Huh.
And they say in their own journals, you know, earlier on that, yeah, it doesn't have, and even the FOIA emails that I have of them talking to each other, they say it. So I'm going to get into this, and we'll start getting into, like, all the craziness, but I got sick, and just my life, I mean, it's come to, like, a halt, basically. Like, I still go to work and stuff, but it's like every day, just like dragging, just like you just feel like something's just ripping the life out of you. And so the doctors, they tell me nothing's wrong with you. If I bring up Lyme disease, it's like they want to send me right out the door.
Wow.
So they still haven't verified with the clinical test that you have Lyme disease?
They don't know nothing. And I stopped going to them because doing my own research, I'm like, these guys are really stupid. Like, these doctors, like, you know, they're pseudo-intellectuals. They know stuff they were taught, but they don't really, like, know how to take data and analyze it.
It's a form of brainwashing.
Morons. I'm sorry to say it, but
it's a form of brainwashing, and all they know are the chemical medications.
It's like an indoctrination for those guys, and a lot of them are really miserable. Yeah. But back to this, I created a timeline. Okay. It's on my website. Okay. I have a website called Operation OpenScript. It's to get the dialogue talking about bioweapons development and testing. You know, there's people think of the word and they're like, oh, conspiracy theory. No, biodefense is real. They work on this stuff, and the labs aren't always secure. I'm not saying the whole government wants to, you know, get everybody sick and it's like this, you know, big conspiracy. I'm saying it's compartmentalized people. Some of them actually do have these covert programs. But, you know, as with anything, most of the government, most of the medical people on the lower end of it, really good people, they mean well. So when you go up higher, you get to that higher level of corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I created a timeline. It starts around the 1950s, and I'm just going to start going through it.
Sure.
Okay.
And you'll see some really crazy stuff, I'm telling you. So we had 1921, right? The Army is already experimenting with ticks in exotic disease, relapsing fever. Borrelia burgdorferi is a relapsing fever organism. That's what they call it. It's like up and down. It goes dormant, it comes back on. So there's they had research, relapsing fever in Panama. The human tick, Orthodoros talahe, demonstrated to be transmitting agent of relapsing fever in Panama by human experimentation. So they had some, voluntary people doing this back then in the army down in Panama. They were already, researching using ticks as vectors somewhat, but it would become more prominent once they had a Nazi doctor when they took him over from Operation Paperclip.
Which Panama are you talking about? Are you talking about Panama, Florida in the United States, or
No,
Panama?
I'm talking about Panama, like the country.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so later on, Dr. Cornelius Rhodes, under the Rockefeller Institute, he wrote a letter about, I guess he was mad or something, but he wrote a letter to his colleague about inducing cancer in Puerto Ricans down in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
And killing some people. He later became the head of the bioweapons facilities in America. I think it was Fort Detrick. But anyway, after that, right? Have you ever heard of Tuskegee syphilis study?
Mm-mm.
That was a study conducted by the public health agencies where they left African Americans untreated for syphilis.
I remember that. What year was that?
1932.
Okay, yeah.
And so they left them untreated. They had the cure. They just left them untreated. They wanted to see the progression.
Yes.
Oh,
This is going to be big. This is a big part of this.
Yes.
Tuskegee is a big part of this. The blueprint, the way their playbook, they use the public health agency to conduct what looks like benign research, helping people.
Mm-hmm.
So they leave these guys, with syphilis, and then they start, even some of them got injected with syphilis through vaccines.
Yes, I remember that. I don't remember it like I wasn't alive at that time, but I researched it, yeah.
The initial study was supposed to last for 6 months. It lasted for 40 years. Oh my God. And it ended when they died. When they died, that's when it ended.
Wow.
How horrible.
There was a few survivors. Bill Clinton was the one who came out with the so-called apology to the people. I mean, it's just absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, so this shows you. So they misdiagnosed them. They told them they had bad blood. So that was another part. This is part of their playbook. Misdiagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Watch the disease progress. Research that. And then, that's because what it does is overwhelms people. It's not a quick fix. People don't understand that something that takes a long time to come online is actually more useful. Is if they were to strike a country with a quick acting biological agent, they'd be able to contain it quicker. When you have something that's slow, and not only that, something that makes non-specific symptoms, that means it could be related to anything.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so easy to misdiagnose Lyme disease, and they call it the great imitator.
Wow.
So what that's about is overwhelming the infrastructure. It's like tire and exhaust, a country. It's like a slow death.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's kind of like, it's like they're just patient, like strategic patience, just waiting it out. So after that, 1942, Canada enters a secret agreement with Britain to participate and develop biological weapons. Principal diseases started included anthrax and brucellosis. Let's go to, so now 1945, there was a Japanese biological warfare program called Unit 731. It was like the Nazis' biological program, and they actually kind of worked with each other, exchanging information.
Mm-hmm.
they took a bunch of those scientists. And some were saying they were even working with Borrelia. And I mean, that's not I think it's confirmed in maybe like one book, but I haven't seen it anywhere else. But mostly it was like plague, anthrax. But so we took those scientists after World War II. After that, in 1946, Dr. George Merck of the pharmaceutical industry, they learned how to extract a disease toxin from bacteria in a crystalline form for aerosol diffusion. It was brucellosis, and they think that's where like there's some proteins that are attached to it they use to add to other pathogens to really just, because that's the kind of disease, it doesn't kill you, it just wears you down.
Right.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
So after that, they had a few deaths at Fort Detrick from brucellosis. Now, this is the big part.
Okay.
After World War II, we took those Japanese, but we also took the Nazis, some of the war criminals in the Nazi camp. A man named Dr. Eric Traub.
Dr. Traub, okay.
Dr. Traub.
So this man, he was a bioweapons expert in Nazi Germany. I'm going to give you a little picture of how high he was in the command. You had Hitler. Under Hitler, you had Heinrich Himmler.
Right.
Under him, there was one other guy, and then under him, it was Kurt Blom. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name, but he was the head of the biological warfare program, and then under him was Traub. So he was like fourth in command to Hitler.
Okay.
We took him over here, and we put him on our most sensitive bioweapons program after he was in Russia. After World War II, he got sent to the Soviet Union. He somehow escaped. I don't know if they just let him escape or what happened. He came over to work for us. This stuff was highly classified. I know that. I mean, this was like up there. So he was on, he did some work at Plum Island, and he was also, I think he was in Fort Detrick, and he worked for the Navy for some time. They were very fond of Dr. Traub. He was actually he was a subject of an investigation, a FBI investigation, where somebody was living next to the Frank DuPont residence, installing these large fuel tank systems underground, massive, right?
Yeah.
And they're talking about how he's so pro-Nazi. And he was. There was a camp, I forget what it was called, but it was somewhere in the United States where Nazis could get together.
Yeah.
And he was a big part of that. He was offered to stay in America before the war, and he cited loyalty to the Reich, and he went back to Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So we took I forgot to mention, he was educated in America at the Rockefeller Institute.
Oh, no.
Then,
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so I mean, it wouldn't be surprising for him to have something like a summer home or something, you know?
Yeah.
But it turns out that he was probably a Soviet spy.
Wow.
You know,
Well, he's got all kinds of connections, though. You got the Rockefellers and then the Nazis.
They were worried about him overthrowing the government. That's why he was in an FBI investigation, and he's heading our bioweapons program.
Right. Wow.
I mean, it's out of control.
Yeah.
Right. So, and another thing. Listen to this. They say Dr. Little described Traub as a domineering German and a surly type of individual with a violent temper. Another colleague said that despite long training in the care of animals, Traub went out of his way to be cruel to animals.
Yeah.
This guy was a monster. He was sick. And
sounds
so
like a sociopath.
His wife got citizenship in the 1950s. Now we're going to take you to there's a DOJ investigator. His name's John Loftus. He wrote a book called America's Nazi Secret. Used to be called the Belarus Secret. He was a Nazi hunter for the DOJ. And what he found files, and they were just basically letting all these war criminals come over here and work for us. And they just said, oh, because we needed to fight the Soviets. Most of them were Soviet spies. And so now this is about the tick research. He found the files on Traub. He said, even more disturbing are the research records of the Nazi German warfare scientists who came to America. They experimented with poison ticks dropped from planes to spread rare diseases. I received some information suggesting that the U.S. tested some of these poison ticks on the Plum Island artillery range off the coast of Connecticut during the early 1950s. I explored the old spies hypothesis that poison ticks were the source of the Lyme disease spirochetes, and that migrating fowl were the vectors that carried the ticks to Plum Island, all up and down the eastern seaboard. Most of the German warfare records have been shredded, but there is a top secret U.S. document confirming that clandestine attacks on crops and animals took place at this time. The Lyme disease outbreak in America was monitored secretly under the cover of a New England health study. And that's the key here. A lot of these things are they have like this buffer zone that maintains plausible deniability.
Yeah.
So you'll see this across the board, no matter what. The agencies, they never do anything in their own name anymore, basically. They use the corporate world. That's what they do.
Yeah.
Nothing gets traced back to them. That's what it's all about.
Right.
For sure.
And then they hide under this law called Title 50, Section 1520A. And I'll get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
So we have, so they say, and Michael Carroll in his book, because I'm going to read some of this stuff, so it's not like I'm reading off a script, but I'm just reading some of the stuff that these people wrote so you can hear it.
Okay.
A lot of people don't like to read, but I'm telling you, there's some really, bombshell information in some of this stuff. So Michael Carroll, he's talking about, there's a lot of tests going on all across America. He starts talking about the USDA and Eric Traub. He said, Traub might have monitored the tests. A source who worked on Plum Island recalls that animal handlers and a scientist released ticks outdoors on the island. They called him the Nazi scientist. When he came in 1951, they were inoculating these ticks. And a picture he once saw shows the animal handler pointing to the area on Plum Island where they released the ticks. So you got that, and then they start breeding mosquitoes up in Canada and to spread diseases.
Of course.
Yellow fever.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
That was
Zika.
1950.
Later.
They discovered that from 1950 to 1969, having exposed millions of persons in the United States to a variety of germ and chemical agents, over 300 tests in the United States.
So again, none of this is conspiracy theory. This is all fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
all I'm dealing with. Of course, you don't have the smoking gun, a document that says, yes, we use Lyme disease.
Right.
But I have so much circumstantial evidence that it is unbelievable. You'll see the picture when I bring it. And that's all I'm really saying is I want people to investigate further. I want them to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get to the bottom of this. That's what I'm saying. A lot of people are getting really sick, and you're going to see a lot more people get really sick too.
Yeah. Can you tell me, Adam, because all I've heard all of my life is Lyme disease. You get bit by a tick and 3 days later you're dead. But you're saying that there's another strain or a different kind, or what is it?
There's tons of them. Lyme disease has killed people, but it's more of a slow, it's more like an AIDS illness.
Oh my Lord.
And it affects your immune system too, right?
Your immune system off, and that's it.
Yeah.
But there's probably 30 different strands of Borrelia burgdorferi that you can get. You can get Babesia. That's a malaria-like parasite. Bartonella, ehrlichiosis.
And all of these are man-made. I mean,
Yeah.
they're created
Well,
in the laboratory.
Here's what I'm going to tell people. Because people say, oh, they didn't make Borrelia because it was around forever. You're right. I'm not saying they made the disease. I'm saying they enhanced the disease.
Mm-hmm.
They weaponized the disease.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. They take natural diseases and they weaponize them.
Right.
I
And then
wonder,
spread them.
Sometimes I wonder what a natural disease is anyway. You know, where did these diseases start? You know, I mean,
it's, you know,
I'm not
good. Like we had a system before where they had a purpose. There was good bacteria. I think we tolerated things before, but now they've used genetic engineering.
Yes.
And they're making these things. I mean, in the Cold War, they were designing drugs that overtake vaccines, overtake antibiotics. They're making things so that you can't fight it.
Right, super bugs. Right.
Yeah, that's the reason. I mean, that's my opinion. Is that's why we have drug-resistant diseases. It's not because they just. I really think they're weaponizing them, and I'll get into some of that too.
Okay.
But you're right. I mean, it's unbelievable. And they're also making these chimera viruses where they take different diseases and mold them together.
Wow.
It's amazing.
So hybrids, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 1950s, they're kind of ramping up, doing a lot of tests. There was Project Whitecoat, where there were some voluntary Seventh-day Adventists who allowed themselves to be injected with all these viruses and exotic diseases.
That's odd.
All right, so this is important. 1954, a man named Willy Burgdorfer. That's what Lyme disease is named after him. In 1954. He was a scientist, a biodefense specialist working for the NIH Rocky Mountains lab. Experimental infection of the relapsing tick, Borrelia ladichevi, I think that's how you say it. So he's already working with infecting ticks with Borrelia, 1954.
Wow.
And I just want to say to everybody, I have all the documentation. I'm going to leave it with Angie. She's going to put it in the description. It's going to leave you it's going to be like a archive page. It's going to show you links. It's going to lead you to another PDF that's going to show you every document, and it's going to link to that document. And you can also download the timeline. So Willy Burgdorfer, he was doing that in 1954. They continued on. 1957, he's still doing. He publishes Artificial Feeding of Exotic Ticks for the Studies on the Transmission of Disease Agents. So they are very well acquainted with this stuff.
Wow.
Working with it. There's another one called Leptospira. It's another spirochete like Borrelia burgdorferi. Plum Island was working with that one.
Tell me where Plum Island is, Adam.
All right. I'll show you. This is this is Long Island.
Yep.
This is Plum Island. That's where the outbreak of Lyme disease began.
Oh.
Right there. And then out here, babesiosis.
Yeah. Wow.
What a coincidence.
Wow.
So we got Plum Island. I got the reprints. It's a big thing that shows all their research. They're researching leptospirosis, another spirochete like Borrelia. Now, 1962, they isolate something called mycoplasma. Mycoplasma is it's an ancient fungal bacteria, not even a bacteria, it's not a fungus. It's Anyway, it's a devastating illness. They weaponize that, but I got Plum Island working with mycoplasma in 1962. 1964, still working with it, ultrastructure of mycoplasma species. Now, there's a mycoplasma organism called Mycoplasma fermentans. That's one of the, about probably 75% of people with Lyme disease have Mycoplasma fermentans. So you have them working with that 1962 to 1964, and they keep working with it. But that's going to be significant later on in Texas. Do you know a town called Huntsville?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There was a Huntsville mystery illness. I think it was about 1995. A lot of people died. Like a lot of people got really sick with like ALS, MS. Multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
All, kids were just like, they had so many cases of them. But I'll get into that. So in a little bit, because that's kind of a big story. We have that. We have, 1964, we have them freeze drying Borrelia. Freeze drying is used in biowarfare. It's like it's like almost like, I think it's like for like aerosol. It's like the delivery system. They freeze dry it, and then it's like storable.
Yeah.
It's called lyophilization.
Wow.
So we have them. This guy wrote a paper about what that process is. He says delivering an agent requires preparing it to remain effective when outside its standard growing conditions. Environmental stresses such as temperature, ultraviolet radiation, and drying can lower the agent's activity. Other agents need further processing to minimize the amount of damage done to it. It also allows it to retain its normal activity when actually dispersed to the target area. Procedures such as direct freeze drying, lyophilization, deep freezing, powdering, and milling, once stabilized, the pathogens are ready to be dispersed into the environment.
So it almost sounds like there were chemtrails way back then, maybe.
Well, I'll get to that too. But so then later on, I see another paper. This was down in the CDC in Georgia. It was like a joint lab with other organizations. And then I have like a paper like 2 years later or so where they're working with Army. So it is a joint military thing. So they're freeze drying Borrelia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, okay.
Wow.
Now that in 1964, a lot of stuff happened in 1964 there. But I have research where they're saying reactivation, they're trying to reactivate viruses with stuff. Like this research is called reactivation of neutralized foot and mouth disease virus with chemicals other than fluorocarbon. This is going to be significant later when I say reactivation of latent viruses.
So is it your take that they were experimenting with this, like they were trying to create things for the enemy and they're testing it on their own people, or they're just trying to depopulate? What is your take on it?
I think it's like multifaceted.
Yeah.
On one level, as I'm going to get into this, there's massive safety violations where these things just aren't containable. I mean, these are living organisms.
Yeah.
And they're ferocious living organisms. And there is, on one level, there is actually like a depopulation agenda, and there's memorandums written about it. And I'll get right into that.
Wow.
Watch. We'll just kind of fly through this kind of.
Sorry to keep interrupting. I just have other questions.
No, it's good. It's good to kind of like educate people, but there's so much stuff here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot.
1966, Baylor College of Medicine, the NIH, MD Anderson Cancer Center start prison testing program with Mycoplasma fermentans, Mycoplasma pneumoniae, a number of other experimental pathogens. This was part of a cancer virus research program. they're developing things that cause cancer. The Army was overtly doing, they had the program where they were trying to make it a weapon, but then they had the public health agencies where they're acting like they're trying to find a cure for it.
Sure.
So that's what they do.
And cancer gets to be, you know, oh, that's just a natural thing that happens.
And Dr. Erich Traub, the Nazis, they conducted their biowarfare programs under cancer research.
Oh my gosh.
Same playbook.
Wow.
They researched with Candida, brucellosis, just a ton of these fungal toxins. Fungal toxins are the most devastating.
Yeah.
So after that, let me see. There's an outbreak on Plum Island, duck virus, enteritis. I actually discovered yesterday. There's research done and that they published showing them working with it before the outbreak. Then it comes out, and it was like right after they researched it. A duck got sick, and then a year later, full-blown outbreak.
Wow.
That's one outbreak so far with Plum Island. You'll see many more. In 1969, that's when they started their real cancer research program. There was a secret meeting asking for millions of dollars to develop a new weapon which would be refractory to the human immune system and for which no natural immunity could have been acquired. In other words, the victims would have a deficiency of acquired immunity. Oh. They're making these AIDS-like viruses. That's what their goal is here.
Wow.
Mutate bacteria and viruses to create new microorganisms which did not naturally exist. And there'd be two classes, one that would kill you, one that would kill instantly, and one that would like tire and exhaust. There are two classes. Now this is the strange part. He gave the project a timeline of 5 to 10 years. They'd have it developed. This was 1970. 5 years later, Lyme disease hits Connecticut. 10 years later, AIDS hits New York.
Oh, boy.
No
Wow.
way.
That unbelievable.
Wow.
This stuff's provable. I mean, they have the secret meeting. I've got the links. You got to go check this stuff out for yourself. I'm telling you. So after that, I mean, they got people that are supposed to, when they do transporting viruses to Plum Island, they got people like bringing it in their car, getting into accidents, having the virus fly into a field.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Then they're working with, I found in 1907, they were working with something called Thaleria parva. It's like a babesia-like, it's a malaria-like parasite, and it's a lot like babesiosis. They even said, when the genome of Babesia bovis, another protozoan parasite that infects red blood cells and causes babesiosis in cattle, was sequenced in 2007, and their genomes were found to be remarkably similar. So this was 1970. 1967 was the first case of human babesiosis. So the military was probably working with it in secret, much because this is just public. There's a lot of stuff that we're not seeing.
Absolutely.
But even with the stuff they published, you can see a lot of stuff going on. I mean, you just connect the dots, you know?
Yeah, they think we're too stupid to connect dots.
Yeah. But we aren't. We're gonna take these. We're gonna get people to realize what's going on. They're working with Coxsackie B5 virus. That's another human pathogen. And the funny thing is, there's an article later where there's a problem with kids having this foot and mouth disease, something that's supposed to only infect cattle, but it infects humans.
Yep.
And on top of that, the Coxsackie, and creating a lot of problems. I mean, they're working with this stuff, and you'll see how bad this facility is in a minute. Henry Kissinger, he wrote a national security memorandum 200, where he's talking about the world population. We need such limits would require an increased death rate or a decreased birth rate.
Oh my.
And this is right around the time they're developing the cancer viruses.
Yeah.
Plum Island doctor or scientists becomes sick with an unknown illness, and they hush him into retirement. Gets no answers from doctors. They told him to have his kidney removed, and they wouldn't tell him why. Then after that, 1975, another guy gets sick, hushed into retirement. They just up the ante and make the the payments higher. Now, 1975, Lyme disease hits Old Lyme, Connecticut. Now they have a man go down there by the name of Alan Steer. This would be like the authority on Lyme. He was part of the EIS, which is the Epidemic Intelligence Services. This is like the CIA of the CDC. Yeah. Well, he's also a CDC officer, Yale professor. First went down there, diagnosed him with juvenile arthritis, and later changed the diagnosis to a spirochete infection from ticks. And also in 1975, the National Cancer Institute gets involved with the cancer research. So you had the other guys, the military first, the Defense Department. Now it's getting extended into the National Cancer Institute. I mean, that's a big front. I'm telling you, that's like 1975, and they're infecting white-tailed deer with rinderpest.
Wow.
And not only were they doing it on the ticks, they were doing it on the deer.
For sure. Like releasing the ticks on the deer, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, laboratory experiments.
And laboratory experiments on the deer. Wow.
A swine flu kills an Army soldier in Fort Dix in New Jersey, 1976. Kissinger, in 1976, they offer the populace a free vaccination against smallpox. I think this was in Africa. Millions received the vaccine within 5 years. Close to 60% had a new disease, AIDS.
Wow.
You hear like John Rappaport talks about this a lot of times. I don't know if you ever like listen to him. I mean, that's like unbelievable to see how many people you're just murdering.
Yeah. And they don't care.
Nobody says anything.
I just don't understand how people could think that it's normal to get shot up with vaccinations, with diseases.
People don't understand.
It's unbelievable.
This is what they don't understand. Okay, the science of vaccination, yeah, it might work a little bit, but this isn't the problem. They're weaponizing these things.
Yeah.
Right.
And not only that, the mycoplasma grows within it. They can't stop it. Yeah. It's like it gets into it. These things get contaminated. They don't test for mycoplasma.
So Adam, how far up do you think this goes? Like, do the doctors know about this? I mean, are they giving their own families vaccinations?
This goes high level. This goes to the elite bankers. This goes to the Bill Gates, the Bill and the Gates Foundation.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the highest.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that is because, like, a doctor, a physician, he wouldn't give his own family a vaccination if he thought it was bad for him, right? I mean, so
there are a lot of people that are, there are a lot of those guys that are almost like indoctrinated just to go along with it, even though they know.
Right. Yeah.
I had a little student nurse come in today, and she didn't have a voice at all, and she said she works for JPS, and she said they forced them to take the flu vaccine. And so
I'm telling you right now, this is going to become a big epidemic, and it's because of that vaccine.
Yeah,
we're getting a live virus.
Absolutely. And she goes, and she was whispering because she didn't have a voice, and she goes, they forced me to take the flu vaccine.
Yeah.
And she said 2 days later I got the flu real bad, and she goes, I just got over that 2 days ago, and now I have bronchitis. She's like, it's one thing after another.
So what you're saying right now is pretty interesting. It should be really interesting to see what happens in 2 or 3 years from now, because they're really pushing that vaccine this year. I mean, more than I've seen it in years.
And scaring people. They're using the scare tactic, and they're terrifying people, going, oh, it's a big flu epidemic. But other reporters have sent people out, and there's really not a flu epidemic.
I don't get any flu shots, and I don't get the flu. Like,
never.
I even got sick. I never got sick because I always knew, like, my instincts kept telling me that's bad. That's bad.
Yeah. Us too. Our kids have never had the flu vaccine. We've never had the flu.
Like, my instinct is not to drink fluoridated water too.
No.
Right?
In 1978, right, there was a foot and mouth disease outbreak on Plum Island. They didn't know how it happened. All the animals got sick. They didn't know what to do. They had to incinerate every animal on the island.
Oh my goodness.
And then they had to inspect all the neighboring farms and everything to make sure it didn't get out. Okay?
Wow.
And it was a big thing with the press. It was like, you know, they had to lie about it. They lied, you know, obviously. Now, in 78 to 79, there was a federal investigation resulting from the foot and mouth disease outbreak on Plum Island. I'm going to read this stuff through. You are going to just be like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So, the Emergency Disease Organization came in to inspect the conditions at Plum Island to investigate the cause of the outbreak and who may be responsible. Severe safety violations and extremely disturbing maintenance infractions would be discovered, and Plum Island Germ Laboratory would be deemed unsafe for use on disease research and was ordered to be shut down until they could make conditions safe again. So here's some quotes from what happened. Most disturbing, this is actually a section from Lab 257 from the research Carol did. And this is what they found. It said, most disturbingly in Wiggins' memo was his casual admission about the most dangerous part of the facility, the incinerator area. Tests of this area show that hundreds of cubic feet of air a minute from a highly potential contaminated area have been escaping. Another area that comes to mind would be the exhaust air from the laboratory. Wiggins suggested that the 107 filter units on the roof that trap pathogens as air exited the building. He says, for nearly 10 years, I have recommended that these filters be tested after each change and that we changed them. He did not mention what was preventing him from changing it. But it seems quite obvious. The virus was transported by humans to the animals. That's what he says. And later on, says, I see little to gain and much to lose by delaying the return to normal operations. The next morning, they checked the place out. It says the air intake had been blocked and the supply intake ducts to the incinerator were jammed wide open. Outside light shined into the air, flowed out of the room. A chamber that was supposed to be sealed to the outside world. A committee member pointed out lead tape applied across the latch of the emergency door, which now hung slightly ajar. Several filter units had media improperly installed with gaps up to 3/4 of an inch. That meant that at any one given time, no less than 750,000 viruses could be exiting the building, marching out side by side.
Wow.
For the air pressure to contain germs properly within the room, it had to start in reverse order. Stunningly, the electrician had wired the safety interlock backwards.
Oh my God.
Ducked out.
Oh my God.
Man, you must have freaked out when you read that, because I just freaked out when I just heard that. That's unbelievable.
Now, they're supposed to keep a gauge of the, keep logs and stuff.
Yeah.
They were dummying the logs. It says it's apparent that a knowledge of pressures is essential by someone during incineration with a responsibility to maintain control of the pressure required. They weren't doing that. I said, if the incinerator was in bad shape, the condition of the roof was even worse. The rubber gaskets designed to seal the gaps between the air filters and roof masonry were brittle, cracked, and leaky. Some gaskets were altogether missing. The filter housings were installed in such a way as to leave openings, allowing the complete passage of air without the benefit of filtration. It was as if someone with no training ripped an old one out and slapped a new one in, giving the task zero thought. The ductwork had holes punched into it. Replacement filters were much thinner in size than those used in years past. Wigan's roof tour was disturbing, and its ramifications were nothing short of terrifying. The air pressure logbook for the experiment rooms during 4 weeks prior to the outbreak wasn't even dummied like the incinerator logbook. It was blank. Meaning that the germs were being circulated. Oh, and he said Wigan found that lab rooms were way out of proper balance and some were positive to the outside, meaning that germs were being circulated through the entire laboratory building. Bad air, hot with viruses, was being forced to exit somewhere. It had a choice of possibilities, through a heavy paper and charcoal filters designed to catch germs, or through the easier path via gaping holes in the roof.
Oh,
to top it all off, he found no air filters maintenance. The rubber gaskets hadn't been changed in nearly 30 years when they were first installed in the early 1950s, rendering each filter between the defective gaskets virtually useless. And they weren't the only filters in question. Some of the sewage vent filters, which strained biologicals out of animal waste, were in poor condition. A few were even missing.
Tell me, who was this that did this?
Plum Island.
Oh my God.
And so this was a government agency that went into here.
They were under federal investigation for that foot and mouth disease outbreak.
Oh, okay. Wow. This
is what they realized. This is what they uncovered. This was so bad. It was like, you might as well just go outside on the patio and cook up some viruses and have some hot dogs and stuff, you know?
Right. And this is a government agency and they hide and cover up everything. Imagine, like you said, this is just the public stuff. Imagine what they didn't make public.
Yeah, there was 4 outbreaks. The duck virus, there was the foot and mouth disease outbreak. There was Lyme disease outbreak, and then there was Rift Valley fever, and that killed people. That was so it was foot and mouth disease and Rift Valley fever are directly traced to Plum Island. But I directly traced the duck virus through that journal. They were researching it before. It's a little circumstantial, but look at all the other stuff. Look at how their laboratory was. Look at the 2 other outbreaks, and then Lyme disease smack right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So, ask yourself, what are the chances? It's like, okay.
Are these laboratories still in operation?
Yeah, they're under the Homeland Security. I think Plum Island's trying to move to Kansas, Manhattan, Kansas, right in the middle of animal this
of
is
course
all livestock.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Does that make any sense? And the farmers are all nervous about this. I
guess so.
They don't know what to do. They're like, "Why are you moving over here?"
Unbelievable.
And they probably looked into this stuff. They see how ridiculous, incompetent these people are. It kills me.
This is excellent research that you've done.
Yeah, so they're still, 1980, they're still doing tick research and experimental diseases, more testing. Okay, Willie Bergdorfer, 1981, he was a biodefense specialist, like I said, in the 1950s, working with ticks and Borrelia. Finds the Borrelia burgdorferi agent. They named it after him as a strain. I think it came from Africa originally, but they probably brought it through the ticks. They were importing ticks these pig ticks, and they were the ones that were found to have Borrelia burgdorferi, and they were from Africa. I'll get into that in a little bit too.
How long have you been researching, Adam?
Well, the thing is, right? It was really spontaneous that I ran into that book, Lab 257.
Yeah.
And I read it, and I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And that was the first thing that woke me up, actually. But see, I was always kind of awake. I always kind of knew the media is a bunch of liars and stuff. But I didn't know stuff. I didn't know the full extent of anything. I didn't know the details.
Yeah.
Dr. Traub, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
how do you bring a guy like that over here after
Yeah.
he's been to the Soviet Union, and then you put him on the most sensitive bioweapons program? I mean, it's almost like they do it on purpose. I mean,
Yeah.
higher level people.
Of
Yeah.
course. And then also, will you talk about the song that you sent to me? Because I'm going to put that in, and you can kind of talk about that, because you're right. Everything that you've talked about tonight has been in the song. Like, that was awesome.
There's a really good thing. I actually made that today. My producer made the beat, and then I just kind of put the clips in.
Yeah.
And I also have my foreign policy. Foreign policy is my hip hop group. You know, it's not like that garbage rap. It's like we talk about like
real stuff.
You're awake. You'll see. I got this song. I was hoping you might be able to put at the end of it. It's called "Spawn of the Matrix: The Black Widow's Web."
Sure.
It's really cool. I've been doing this a while, and I think hip hop can be used to like wake people up, and it doesn't have to be that garbage you hear.
February 1956. In the heart of New York, Operation Big City was underway. A Ford Mercury, specially adapted with a hidden exhaust pipe, pumped out bacteria onto the streets of Manhattan.
They were working with it when it mysteriously popped up, and it can cause death. I have death certificates and a whole bunch of papers at home on that.
At 18 weeks, I sensed something was wrong. My instinct was correct. Our baby boy was dead. And I began wondering about the Lyme disease. I had read that Lyme disease could cause miscarriage, but there was no evidence to prove it. I called my Lyme doctor in a lab skilled in detecting the bacteria so I could determine how to test the fetus and the placenta for the bacteria. I took the information to the hospital, and just before the surgery, I insisted that the OB obtain enough tissue for a separate PCR test for the Lyme bacteria. I needed an answer. I received that answer the next Monday when the OB called me to report that the fetus and the placenta were PCR positive for the Lyme bacteria.
But, and you know, I don't try to be anybody I'm not. I just, you know, I talk about the world, and it's like an abstract form, you know.
Yeah. And you can wake people up through music. I
Exactly,
mean, it's
that's
an
what-
excellent avenue because everybody loves music.
And it's so ridiculous, like all this Russian nonsense. Like, because, I mean, I was doing this all before this Russian hysteria. It was like me and my friend, you know, he hates Putin. It's like, but it's like this, you know, the climate in America is like so anti-Russia. What have they done to us? Nothing, really. I mean,
No.
they got some people in here, but the Chinese and like everybody else are like much more like of a threat.
Yeah.
Well, the actual citizens haven't done anything to anybody,
No.
just like
Yeah,
you
like,
haven't done
It's
anything.
not
to
a
anybody.
war between us. We
It's
like
the governments.
I talk to them, and you know, I'll talk to anybody who's. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, we make really good music, and we're gonna keep going. I'm trying to keep going. I'm just been so sick lately.
Yeah.
In 1980, I'll get back to this. Well,
Okay.
1982, there was a guy named Dr. Fred Conrad from the MD Anderson Cancer Center. Somebody shot him in the face 6 times in his office.
What was he trying to expose?
I think, Dr. Garth Nicholson. There's a guy named Dr. Garth Nicholson. He wrote a book called Project Daylily. It's about the mycoplasma testing in the Huntsville prison system, the Texas prison system,
Yeah.
and then the Huntsville mystery illness. But it also ties into the Gulf War syndrome.
I had a friend that had that.
He found that I think like more than half of them had Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus, that mycobacteria that I was talking about. And they came down on him hard. He was fired. He was discredited. They went after him. I talked to him. He's a really good guy. You probably look up on YouTube, go type in Dr. Garth Nicholson, weaponized mycoplasma. He does a really good lecture on it. Well, you know, and he's one of the most sourced microbiologists around.
Wow.
He's not like an amateur. He's not this crazy, you know, nutcase. He's serious. So that guy got shot in the face 6 times. Now this MD Anderson Cancer Center is tied in with the Bushes. There's a guy the guy who was running it at the time, Dr. Charles Lemaistre. They think he was behind this murder. Well, like he's implicated in the story. See, Dr. Nicholson tells that story like it's fiction, but he says the story's true. He just changes the names and some of the times of the events and stuff. You know, I think they were coming down on him really hard. I mean, that's just how he did it. I think he just did it, you know, to try to show you a story. So that guy got shot in the face 6 times. Nothing happened. They never solved that murder. MD Anderson Cancer Center, along with Baylor College of Medicine, they were heavily tied into testing. And there was testing going on all over the United States. If you go on my the document that I leave, there's something called the Cancer Virus Research. You just look in that. It'll show you the list of all the cancer research. This place was one of them. So they were going to the prisons, getting them sick with mycoplasma, candida, all these fungal toxins. A lot of them died.
Wow.
And
Wow.
see, they were being told that it was like this voluntary thing and nothing would happen to them. They weren't told the full, you know, story.
You could die thing.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, there's a doctor, a distinguished doctor named James Watson. Dr. James Watson, he was part of the Human Genome Project. And I noticed a lot of this has to do with finding breaking down the viruses and finding different parts of them that they can, you know, put together or whatever. That's what I'm seeing anyway. I mean, this guy, he wrote this book called The Double Helix. I mean, this guy's like high up there. He was one of those like serious globalists type of people. That President Lemaistre died in 2017. He was heavily tied into the Bushes. He was tied into Kissinger. He was tied into James Baker III. Frank Carlucci, the Carlyle Group, all of these guys. These are major players in this thing. I'm not going to be too happy about what I'm saying here. Yeah, and it's like they use the same playbook as the Nazis, cancer research. Well, I mean, the Nazis were really the same thing. If you understand the Bush-Nazi connection, which Fritz Thyssen was over in Germany, the wealthiest man in Germany, and then you had Prescott Bush, and then you had the other, bankers on top of him, and they basically poured their money into the Nazis. You had a lot of companies like Ford. There's tons of American companies that were tied in with the Nazis. They were over here. We were teaching them. Dr. Traub, we put them on our most sensitive bioweapons programs. Give me a break. But then I got them in 83 researching more tick-borne diseases. It's Rickettsia ruminantium, which is like it's kind of like babesiosis, but it's called Ehrlichia. Or maybe it's Ehrlichia, I don't know. Now, this is kind of like an animal disease, but then we see it emerge as a human disease not long after. So this is a common theme you see. You see them working with an animal disease,
Right.
and then all of a sudden there's a correlating human disease.
Wow.
And usually through ticks. That's where you get them.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. They had a lot of this stuff's classified, but I'm just putting the pieces together from what I have. They made their own strain of mycoplasma. Mycoplasma mycoides, subspecies mycoides. That's like a triple fungus. Myco means fungus. Anytime you hear that word myco, it means fungus. Now, we found in 1985 in congressional hearings that they were selling hundreds of units of bioweapons to Iraq to use against Iran. This was before the Iraq War and the Gulf War. And they found the shipments were containing deadly anthrax plus disabling Brucella agents, melitensis, suis, and abortus. This later caused chronic fatigue as well as disabling damage to major organs. Some details would later be revealed in congressional hearings. Then you have the government reporting in 86, more modified viruses, naturally occurring toxins, agents that are altered through genetic engineering, change immunological character, prevent treatment by all existing vaccines.
Wow.
Now this is interesting. This is the timeline where, so it's like late 80s. This is where you're going to see a cabal emerge, a Lyme disease cabal. And they would be like the authority on Lyme, and they'd tell you what Lyme is, and if you don't believe what they say, they ridicule you.
Wow.
And they're developing vaccines for Lyme disease using a fungal toxin called OSP-A, outer surface protein A. That's the key here. It's also called PAM3-CIS. Now, this is also like something they use with the AIDS virus. Well, I'm saying it's involved. I can't connect it like with a smoking gun, but I'm saying these things are similar.
Okay.
And they had the cancer virus program going at that time.
Okay.
So this cabal will emerge, and these people are sick. These guys are something else. Like, they do some really crazy shit. Excuse my language. There's a man named Edward McSquegan. He's going to be the key here. He's an NIH official. In 1986, he writes this letter to Senator Goldwater talking about, he says, I have been engaged in postdoctoral research for this institute for the last 22 months. In that time, I have come to conclude that the Navy's in-house research efforts are seriously misdirected and that the funds consumed in these efforts could be better utilized in other areas. The Naval Medical Research Institute is engaged in a number of research programs. This includes everything from biotechnology, schistosomiasis, to diarrheal disease, malaria, hyperbaric physiology, schistomaciasis. I think that's how you say it.
Wow, that's some big words.
Anyway, yeah, I know. They need to make fun of me for that one, but it's all right. Well, he's trying to basically, like, it seems like this is a power play going on. Like, there's some factions. As you know, there's all sorts of factions involved in these kind of things. And there's a lot of money involved. Profit comes into play. People start, competing. People start, what he's basically doing here is trying to convince them to cut the funding for the Navy and then give it to the NIH. He's talking about doing AIDS research here, and then he's saying that the Navy wants their own AIDS research program, and he's telling them not to do it. Now, this guy is very interesting. This guy, you'll see later on, he seems to be like their front guy to do all the dirty work for them. This is like their cleanup guy or something. This is like the, he's got all the characteristics of like a cutout or an asset, somebody that plays multiple roles. He held the top secret security clearance for the State Department from 1986 to at least 1988. So he's got a security clearance. He works for the global virus program. He's NIH official, but he's like deep into like the Lyme disease cabal that emerges with Alan Steer, Alan Barber, Gary Wormser. These names are going to become important in the next in the next video.
Okay.
So this guy's later on. You'll see him. You see on his. He's threatening people through email. People are archiving it. He's telling them they're going to be attacked by the Mossad. All this crazy stuff. He got lawsuits filed against him for slander. He's filing them back, and he's winning them. He seems to be glued together by a few things, like phony PR stunts, intimidation, discrediting tactics. Actually, I have an email. Later on, you're going to see an email. He's talking to somebody named Susan O'Connell, and they're talking about working with the media to propagate their narrative. He's talking about writing articles for the Washington Post. This is through FOIA requests. You can see these emails for yourself. It's all in the documents later on, but we'll get to that in another video. There's just so much stuff here.
Yeah.
So we got that happen. Now they're doing more research with the white-tailed deer, with Ehrlichia, which is a tick-borne infection. 1987, the Defense Department admits that despite a treaty banning research and development of biological agents, it continues to operate research facilities at 127 locations and universities around the nation. There's a lot of tick-borne research done in the 80s. If you look at the Plum Island reprints of all the research they did, it's just like deer, infecting ticks. It's ridiculous. Now, the guy who was running it, Plum Island, he was bad. And he had all these safety violations and stuff. He did a lot of stupid stuff. He was terminated. Now the guy who's gonna come in is like 10 times worse. And then what's gonna happen is they're gonna privatize Plum Island, and it's gonna be a lot different. It's gonna be really bad too. So in 1988, this is when the cabal is really starting to get rolling. There's a man named Alan Barber. He's another NIH Rocky Mountains lab biodefense specialist. They filed the patents for the Lyme disease vaccine in 1988. This is when it all starts getting rolling. Like you have the Lyme disease epidemic, but this vaccine gonna push everything outwards. It's gonna get a lot of people sick.
Yeah.
So they filed that patent. And the patent is made from something called OSP-A, which is outer surface protein A, and that's the fungal antigen. Goes in. It's kind of like hanging on to the spirochetes. They shed these things called blebs, and the outer surface protein is in those, and they basically just shut your immune system off the way it works. They fill certain receptors that cause an overload of cytokines, and then your immune system has to shut off to stop it from killing you, basically. I mean, that's how the mechanism works. But I don't get way too much into the science stuff. There's a woman named Kathleen Dixon. She runs a site called Truth Cures. She's doing a lot of research. She's been doing it a long time. She's been through a lot of stuff. And she is a former Pfizer chem analyst. She knows her stuff. I put all her documents in with the documents I have. If you go, there's something called the charge sheets. That's where you'll know. That's where you learn about the cabal, and that's where you go if you want in-depth scientific research. A lot of people don't really understand it. I don't blame them. That's not really something I like to research, but I have a basic understanding of it. But she's like in-depth. You run circles around everybody else with science, so that's where you want to go if you really want to look at, oh, okay, get into it. But they also find significant relationships between Lyme and MS, Lyme and ALS, Lyme and lupus. There's a lot of things, these syndromes. They just keep coming up with these syndromes. A lot of times, these are infections. I mean, that's really what we're dealing with. There's so many things they don't even test for. There's some things they can't really test for. So, and you'll see it. There's a map later on that'll show the MS and the Lyme disease on a map, and it's like, wow. Now, this is what we'll finish with. This is the cabal. This is the big cabal. This is where you're going to see who's really behind all this stuff. 1990, the ALDF, the American Lyme Disease Foundation. This is basically like a front group to mislead everybody, write training manuals to make sure that nobody gets the right treatment and everybody basically gets misdiagnosed. Now, they were established in the New York NYMC by a guy named John J. Connolly. Heavily funded and supported by special interest groups like Kaiser Permanente. So that, they're tied in with the EIS, Epidemic Intelligence Service, CDC. A lot of people from the CDC are on, they're all members, but I'm going to show you who's on the board of the ALDF, and you're going to be pretty surprised. Now, John J. Connolly, I looked into this guy. He's got connections to the Carlyle Group and DynCorp. These are like the Bush, big-time Bush people. You got, connections ahead. The DynCorp is like Bush family, Henry Kissinger, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, the Communist Chinese. Now he was a director and a board member of several companies like Air Methods Incorporated, which is like aircraft interiors, and he was also like involved with like publishing companies with people from the Carlyle Group. Lists himself as a Republican, but shows numerous donations to Chuck Schumer. Now, J.S. Beckwith Gilbert, another founding chairman of the ALDF, Council on Foreign Relations member, educated at the Rockefeller Institute, owns a private banking firm, executive chairman of Passer Aerospace, Northrop Grumman, the Federal Reserve, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, GlaxoSmithKline, biotech companies. Now the next guy, John Ward III, international banker, American Express, Chase Manhattan Bank, U.S. Century Bank, well connected to the banking world, heavy hitter on Wall Street. Email Henry Jr., Wall Street, founder of Tiger Infrastructure Partners, director of the Lehman Brothers equity firm, member of the World Economic Forum or Davos Group. David G. Nichols Jr., Wall Street banker involved with Citibank, J.P. Morgan, Merrill Lynch. Anthony J. Walton, Council on Foreign Relations member, big-time banker. And you got David Weld, brother of former governor of Massachusetts, another Council on Foreign Relations member. Runs like, or maybe it was his brother that's the Council on Foreign Relations member. He might be, though. He runs this conservation trust. It's kind of like involved with like Agenda 21. Okay. Now, this is the thing. It's like, what do all these guys want with Lyme disease?
Yeah.
I mean, really, what do you think all of these heavy hitter people want to do with Lyme disease?
Sounds like depopulation to me.
I know. And then you got Henry Kissinger. He's writing the memorandum. Look, all I'm saying is, you got some really...
Yep.
You got some crazy stuff going on here. Like, these people are not good people. Or
Right.
maybe, some of them could mean well, but, I mean, what's involved with all these people. Most of the people that watch the show know what's,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they're well-meaning people.
Yeah. I mean, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Facebook funding this working group lately. This Lyme disease working group behind it. And I'm like, oh, what's the agenda here? Probably vaccines.
Probably.
Yeah.
And they got a new vaccine. Now, this is the cabal. This is the cabal forming. But these are just the people on the board. All the people in the public health agencies. I should probably just list them now. There's like Alan Steer from Yale, Alan Barber, Gary Wormser, Edward McSquegan. There's so many more. These people are the guys, they work through the public health, public health agencies, and they write like research papers, like discrediting. Like, if you believe there's chronic Lyme, you're nuts. You're a conspiracy theorist because you believe that a bacteria can survive antibiotics, even though it's not really a bacteria, but like no drugs are, like no disease has ever become drug resistant before.
Right.
That's never happened. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
like this crazy, like, mind games with these people.
Right.
And you'll see it later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like, how am I going to go through all this in 1 hour?
Well, no, you're not going to.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to
Well,
do that.
So excellent research, and I guess we'll just end right here for part one. This is excellent. No, really, good job, great job.
This stuff is explosive. I'm telling you.
So
get
when
into
we come back with you next time, we'll start on the same timeline, and we'll start in the 90s and go forward to kind of current and how you've connected dots there.
Yeah.
And then you can, fill us in more.
Yeah.
Right on.
This is incredible.
Good job, man. Good
It's
job. Thank you.
incredible.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
I'd rather die by the sword, fuck this cursed creation. A slave world, order from the church of Satan. They turn from the waste, burn the third degree. But I'll be past 9 planets like alternative 3. In the virtual reality of war or death. Cause this is Babylon, worship me with gore and flesh. Come on tour with the best in the freaks and hack job. Death cults train that they keep us attacked dog. The black bunch is back on the podium runway. Cause black ops came to run the opium drug trade. We die, let the blood fade, killing me softly. Pressure the flesh when they complete the autopsy. Drop to your blood and play the game for fun. Cause they spirit on the wall like it's angel's blood. Time to drain the fuck from the muck that we live in. And see through that bullshit like 2020 vision. Trip, trip, trip. Come the leaks like bricks pound. 666 coming quick, she strips down. Alarm with the hourglass, crushing her self-soul. Arise like a terror cell in digital hellhole. Trip, trip, trip. Come the leaks like bricks pound. 666 coming quick, she strips down. perspective. This venom is the best for setting deaths collective. Invest in the flesh to vex and feed fate with a sorcery of higher depths to breed hatred. I'm here to meet fate like I seek to pass mine. I bleed in the shadow of death to reach flatline. Hat time, policy is playing the worst on to render missing time like an alien workshop. My ladies of the hearse, she's a dime to fill morgues. A child of the vaccine designed to kill yours. A line amanita, I'm inspiring pitch guard. Divine with collapse like an economic hit squad. Flipped on, poison me in time to stop it. With jobs from the guillotine to fiber optics. Go up with the hatred and spawn to a new phase. Illuminate the fix like the dawn of a new age. Trip, 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 from the leaks like bricks pound. 666, coming quick, she strips down. Alarm with the hourglass, crushing her cell soul. Arise like a terror cell, a digital hellhole. Trip, 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 from the leaks like bricks pound. 666, coming quick, she strips down. Shredded like a weapon, cause her creep show's dead. In this venom collected from the black widow red. Designed in the matrix, our fate is connected. We fascinate the mind like our faces a death flick. The death kiss, killing, but the chill in the room. That'll leave your soul kicking like you're still in the womb. Deep in hell, it's high noon. I'm getting out to enforce this. Cause hell is like a life, you better raise or abort this. So paint a self-portrait and splattered the wall right. With blood on my hands like I'm battling alright. We fall right, measure when the vein reacts. More like killing in the name when I rage bomb tracks and attack. Cause the black budget powers unravel. We speak in many tongues like the Tower of Babel. They travel through a trauma-based black arts to ruin you like Mars attacks. When they come down and start shooting you, Lucifer is shooting you subversive delirious. To paint the world blood like Mother Earth on her period. Trip, 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 from the leaks like bricks pound. 666, coming quick, she strips down. Alarm with the hourglass, crushing her cell soul. Arrives like a terror cell, a digital hellhole. Trip, 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 from the leaks like bricks pound. 666, coming quick, she strips down. Shredded like a weapon, cause her creep show's dead. In this venom collected from the black widow red.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals. I think gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.